in your company today? Let's start with Jack.
Not at all, and I was actually quite surprised to see that come up in the study too, especially when it's, when you're talking purely millennials who are by nature the earliest adopters. I know and I think, almost to your point, a bit about this study seems a bit more consumption-driven versus creation-driven. I was very surprised to see any gender gap in kind of consumption of it, especially at this age group, and I think that from my experience, I would say that's pretty well represented in kind of our groups that are more the newer business units, more the sort of digitally driven products and services. I've found it to be quite unique, so that was surprising to me.
Sophie-Charlotte?
So the surprise around the gender gap is really just the fact, right? If you look at universities, you have more than half of the students are women now in universities in the US, and only 10% of computer science students are women. So that means, in terms of like making career decisions around technologies, women still have, a lot of room to improve. And then seeing that, the outlook of millennials on technology is only, I think, about 20% of what? I think that's actually a good thing. At Facebook, we hire a lot of women, obviously. We have a leader in the company, Sheryl Sandberg, who is a huge advocate of women in technology and just published a book called Leaning, that's part of our movement. So we're very big on, bringing more women in technology.
Yeah, I really like Paul Facebook for setting up a good role model. Even for guys as well, as in I say that word even with quotation marks. So I think there's two things that have happened in Silicon Valley very recently. Sheryl Sandberg and Marissa, right? Mm-hmm. And this is like, we're at the turning point now where there's still a lot of work to do, and I wasn't surprised to see the gap. Because I know a lot of guys that are super arrogant about their technological prowess over everyone, including their female friends. So there's a lot of work I think we still need to do to bridge the gap, and I think if we keep coming back to the question of why are we trying to bridge the gap, not just for equality's sake, but we'll have more creation, we'll have more creative resources if we utilize that. And we'll get better products, and we'll get better experiences, and we'll solve things, and we'll discover things, and we've got to keep asking that question of why are we trying to actually open this stuff up in the first place.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, so I think, at a company like Lyft, it's a very different kind of technology company than I think the way that, maybe people thought about it in the survey. And I think, again, we're all about building community and sort of being this bridge into connecting real people. And so I think for the purposes of the kind of work that we're doing and companies like Airbnb or TaskRabbit, where it's about leveraging technology to really put two people in the same place and have a real conversation. I don't see it quite as much of a gender gap. And when I first started at Lyft a little over a year ago, certainly our whole dev team is mostly male, and there are certain parts of the company that tend to be more male-centric, and I think that will change over time, maybe a little bit more slowly. But tech companies are made up of many, many different pieces, and it's not just about kind of the back end. So I think as you have companies that are more focused on other pieces of the company, I'm definitely seeing a change there.
Yeah, I think there's a similar makeup where our development team, there's mostly men, but business development, sales, and marketing are about an equal split. But it seems to be pretty common.
Why do you think millennial leaders are more civically engaged and hard to drive change through technology? Gina?
Sure. Yeah, I think just speaking from my own experience, I think, our generation maybe hasn't gone through the same sorts of sort of socioeconomic and political circumstances that maybe our parents did, and we haven't had as much of a sort of defining moment in our lives that maybe previous generations have experienced. And so I think for my generation, it feels like people are in search of meaning, and so I think really wanting to make your work identity about creating social change is something that resonates with a lot of millennials, and that's certainly been my experience in the tech world.
Kevin?
Yeah, that's a good point. Also back to Jude's original point about empathy and how our generation is more plugged into information and access to information, and you're seeing things that normally you wouldn't, so that brings out empathy and hopefully drives you to inspire change. And it might not happen with everyone, but it would increase the percentage.
Sophie-Charlotte?
I think also one of the positive effects of social networks is that they bring a much more global outlook on, even very young people. So, wherever you grew up, like whether it's like always in the same country or if you moved around, you very likely will have, a Facebook friend or a friend on your social network that's abroad, and that will just really open your eyes to what's happening in other countries and make you want to change things, either locally or internationally.
So yeah, I would agree with the opening of the data. I think maybe an additional point would be that millennials, or as I'm going to call them, young people, maybe think they have more leverage than they used to have. So you go back 1600s, you're in a village, you're going to go to maybe go work on a farm. You're not thinking about any helping people. You're thinking about helping your family. If you're born today, you see news and you see Facebook updates and tweets and all the information in front of you. You connect to everybody. So, and then you think, hey, if I post this out, I'm going to be able to get this in front of 1,000 people. Or maybe I could set up an online campaign on courses.com and I could actually change some legislation. So I think the leverage that millennials have today is potentially like a million X what they had 100 years ago.
And it's because you have real-time access and real-time engagement. You know exactly how relevant what you just put out there was, whether it's retweeted or whatever. I mean, it's immediately quantifiable. You know how far it went and you know how relevant it was. So all the opaqueness that used to be dissemination of information has been upside down.
Yeah, everybody has a voice now.
Yeah, and it's quantifiable voice.
Right.
That's a good point. So charity water, so they have sensors now. You can see, if you donate, you can see the actual water flowing. You can see the flow rate of the water, and that encourages that feedback loop. Definitely encourages people to get involved.
I also think that all these social media technologies really help young leaders develop a lot of courage, because talking in front of a large crowd is not something that they get like immediately, but talking in front of, I think on average, 300 Facebook friends really requires, from a teenager, a lot of courage at first.
What are your predictions for trends in society and social change due to the information you know about millennials from the survey?
I mean, me personally, I would be very curious to see how things develop in more unstable economies. Because, again, the things are being constantly being mentioned. It's essentially access to information on a purely mobile basis. Total connectivity at all times, all these platforms. And whether it's Arab Spring, what happened in Egypt, whether it's breaking down of the Great Firewall, and sort of what happens in the Chinese political environment and how people react as they're gradually allowed to. I think it'll be fascinating because we've seen all these signs of sort of the different pockets in different places, and is there going to be a big backlash against it? Because it's demonstrated its power, and will it break down more barriers, or will it be more heavily contested? I think in a lot of developing countries, as well as politically tougher to navigate countries, that will continue to happen.
I think an interesting part about that is, even if the revolution does occur, how does the government transition when it's a collective uprising? In history, previously it was a political party or a small group of people that would claim power, but how does a group of 100,000 social media, not experts, but social media activists take power? Is that a possibility at all?
I think we're going to see a ton of changes. When I was, starting my career, I remember hearing, you won't spend your entire life in a company. Like, you'll go from one company to another, and that's how you'll build your career. And now, you have people like Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, advocating that it's going to be like the brand of you, right? The startup of you, and you're going to navigate your career as an individual more than as an employee or founder of a company. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of first of all, what kind of support system is going to be required to enable that? Because right now, especially in the US, all of the healthcare and all of the, so much is tied to your employment. And so probably we're going to see a lot of changes around this and very exciting changes around this.
Yeah, so from my perspective, cryptocurrencies are very interesting, like Bitcoin. I think we're seeing monopolies that were previously owned by private parties being broken apart, rebuilt up into another company, disruption, democratization, sometimes new monopolies being built. So currency is an interesting one. Like every country has a currency, they need the currency to function. And there's been Bitcoinism, this attack on currencies, which is scary for governments, because if money's moving around and you can't control currencies, then you don't have power. So, to me, I'm an extreme libertarian. So, when I look at Kim.com with his numerous number of followers, with his tweets every single day, trying to rally people against things like PRISM and against rights being taken away, we see like this bubbling, this foam underneath the internet. There's this issue. And then you get Tim Berners-Lee complaining about people trying to get hold of the internet and control it. So the network effects at play on power, there's more to win. The network effects are larger, there's more extreme leverage. So I think government is going to have a lot, especially in the Western world, is going to have a lot of pressure. Because the other side is gathering their distributed power. I don't like your point, I don't know where they're going to go. Who's going to become their leader, Kim.com. So we have this giant issue of transparency, control. International law doesn't even work anymore. Look at Edward Snowden. Like, whose law matters anymore? Whose law matters in international water? So yeah, it's everything. I think government is ripe for disruption, but it's got to be done very carefully. Because if it's done too quickly, then things don't work.
Yeah, just to briefly go in a slightly different direction. Yeah, I think what I sort of predict for maybe my own usage and potentially that of others is, this idea that we're so overwhelmed by so many different options and this overabundance of choice. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how people's kind of usage habits consolidate and people sort of zone in on just a few things and become more selective about the ways in which we engage with technology in the traditional sense, sort of through our phones and our laptops and things like that. So I think I predict a movement toward a more minimalist sort of approach to when we use technology and just being a little bit more selective about the time that we spend in that sort of environment.
I agree. I think we're also going to see a lot of changes in kind of how we work. Like right now, how we live. Like right now, so many people organize their lives around their work. Right, they have to be at work from this hour to this hour, this day to this day. And with the new technologies, you can work from anywhere, and so you can live anywhere you really want to, as opposed to have to be close to work, commute, like on regular hours and stuff like that. So that is going to change for the better.
What's the biggest change you've noticed from millennials' influence on mobile commerce? Kevin?
I think we're a lot more trusting. I, at this point, don't really have any fear about entering my PayPal information and paying for something on my phone versus in countries like India, mobile commerce doesn't exist because you simply don't trust that the systems in place will protect your information. That's just my perspective.
So from the gaming perspective, I guess people are much more willing to spend a large amount of money with virtual goods, with products they don't really own that can disappear when they uninstall the game. And they're more interested in experiences than necessarily material products, because they kind of eventually give you the same experience. So that's the biggest change I've seen, and you see that in mobile gaming, people spending lots of money in games like Clash of Clans. Some users will spend $1,000, and some people might think they're crazy. But the person that goes to buy the stereo, what's the difference? So, but yeah, virtualized experiences.
I think I'd say as well too, it's almost like there's been a shift for consumption of goods and services to be more life as a service. And I think Lyft is a great example. The idea, whether it's Lyft or Uber or something similar, the idea that you need to go about it the old way to get a taxi, that I need to actually go and buy music in person physically, let alone individually. Well, why don't I, a subscription for everything? But why can't I have all premium services at a reasonable price point on a sub-only basis? And you see that in a variety of different purely commercial goods, outside of like clothes. It's how many things can I have as a service? There's just a huge shift towards that.
I think loyalty is going to take a very, very central role in mobile commerce, because as people enter more of their data, you're no longer like in a situation where a brand is like talking to as many people as they can to hopefully identify some users and customers. You're in a situation where you have some customers with needs that are pretty well identified because they are known by data, and companies that act as loyalty brokers who partner with brands to offer them what they want. And I think you're going to see a lot of that emerging. And to your point earlier about currency, like because companies like PayPal, Google, and all these guys are offering virtual currencies that go like mobile to mobile, this is going to be enabled very, very easy. It's going to be interesting.